All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. Alex Barry is my name. You might recognize my face from around the club. But with my very capable volunteers this evening, we're going to bring you through a very interesting series of trips that were made back in the summer of 2020 and actually various times of the year as well, but potentially with another season of local activity ahead of us, we thought it might be a good idea to share some of the well-known and the lesser well-known areas around the harbour with you. All the trips we've done this evening, we have undertaken ourselves this year. So it's a very informal session, so feel free to come off mute, ask any questions, do what you like, jump in. We're going to help each other out. We're going to ask support from some others who are on the meeting as well, who've been to these places. And yeah, we may not know it all, so if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in. Just to say as well, I suppose just to note, Eddie English and Sail Cork does do a course. It's called Hidden Harbour, which is a two-part series, which goes, I suppose, much deeper into the history of all the various areas, as well as going into some of the more hidden spots. So these sessions complement each other. They're by no means a replacement for each other. So I think Eddie has one of his Hidden Harbour courses coming up quite soon. So if you're looking for more information, more depth and so on, certainly joining Eddie's course would be very good. And just to say for GDPR, I'm going to record this session. Hopefully it's so good that we can put it on YouTube and fellow members and anybody else who's interested can join in. So without further ado, I'm going to just put up my presentation here, and I'm going to introduce you to some of the lads, and I'm going to let them take over to start with. Okay, perfect. So what we've done is we've split this into three sections. Some of the areas going west of the harbour, some of the areas going east of the harbour, and then in the confines of the harbour itself. And when it comes to going west in the harbour, I'm going to kick it off with James Fagan, is going to bring you through a number of the spots that he's been to this year. So welcome, James. Feel free to take the floor and I'll drive the slides for you here.
Hi, Alex. And can I say well done for pulling this together? Great idea. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, if you want to flick on there, Alex. So guys, where I'm going to go at today is Ringabella area and upriver from Ringabella. I do a lot of paddleboarding locally and a little bit of adventuring on a paddleboard. And later on last summer, we did a bit of a rib run up the river. So Alex, you want to flick on there? There's two areas of interest, I think, for us where I think members could and should utilize a little bit more. First area there, as Alex is pointing out with his cursor, is Ringabella Pier. So I don't know much of the history, and I'm sure members would know more, but if anybody's ever gone and walked to the back beach in Fountainstown, you can see Ferry Point there, just across the shore, the narrow river from Ringabella Pier. And further upriver, we'll talk about it in a minute, there's a dam. I found it quite interesting. I didn't know. Certainly took me 20 years in Crosshaven to realize there was a dam up the river in Fountainstown. But Alex, if you want to flick on, it'll probably come to, yeah. So you go back one, Alex, if you don't mind, just there, yeah. So you're all very familiar with Ringabella Beach, where we all head to. Definitely on the top of the tide, it's worth a rib trip up the river to Ringabella Pier. There's water. There's definitely 3 or 4 feet at the pier on high tide. My recommendation would be to go upstream. The upstream end of the pier is definitely a better berthing, but worth a look. You can drive there as well. Last year I was hoping to do a bit of a rendezvous by car and rib. Didn't work out, but however. So one of the warnings though is actually way downriver. As you can see, this is a Google Maps image, by the way, and it's quite accurate. If you go further downriver, way downriver by where the R of Ringabella is, that's probably the most treacherous part if you're going any other time than high tide. So if you want to flick on, Alex. So to get here is past the old Sean Mods, and it's left afterwards. and you can drive here past Sean Mods. Interesting enough, Vitz's old tug is halfway up the river there. That's the scrap heap you can see in the middle of the shot. And the about a kilometre and a half upriver, there's a dam. The dam was built, the year is going to come up in the slides, but the dam was built to protect Manan Bridge from being flooded by seawater. And you can see it there quite clearly, a lot of water behind the dam. And the dam actually goes from one side of the river to the other. So I haven't done it, but I believe my sister definitely has. You can walk down Manan Bridge and across the dam to end up on the Fountainstown side of the river. Quite interesting. The dam itself, we did a rib run up there. I know Saki and Michael McCann were there. Michael, you might want to join in. I know Michael McCann took a rib to the downstream side of the dam, as you can see in top right picture there, and took a paddleboard upstream of it. I believe you need a slash hook to get to Manan Bridge, but
I've done it actually, James.
Have you?
I went with Funky Town, yeah, and Nin, and we put parked in the car park by the Humpback Bridge and Manan Bridge, and put the kayaks in there and kayaked all the way down. And we actually went through the sluice gates and then landed into Fountainstown.
Brilliant, brilliant. So the dam as a structure itself, for the engineer and me, is an interesting trip. Definitely on high tide, very achievable in a rib. I know Michael McCann had a depth gauge. I had a long paddle, and actually, top tip for anybody who's doing any of these adventures, and I bought one the other day.
We've lost the top tip, have we?
Yep.
Yeah, we just lost the important bit.
Clearly, that's supposed to remain a secret.
I've a half a feeling he might have been suggesting to bring a sandbag. What do you think, Saki?
Yeah, there's plenty of tying on spots. So I'm not sure.
A load of
Where he
Hang
was,
on.
top tip might have been a beer. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We certainly had a few of them. One of the things that if you are going to go and take your paddleboard over it, don't go over to the right of don't go over at the sluice gates, because it's actually very shallow there. It's actually much deeper if you go over the side of the wall.
Very good. And what sort of time did you get up there? Would you get an hour up there?
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. A few familiar faces there. Good stuff. Okay. James is going to bring us through another one which he uncovered here. A little Smuggler's Cove. Not sure if anyone knows about it, but he's not back in yet, right? But what we'll do is we'll come back to that one. If we keep going west, this Smuggler's Cove is just off Ringabella here. So if we keep going past that, you'll ultimately end up pulling into Roberts Cove, and that's one that Dave Kennefick at least was in last year. Dave, do you want to mention that one?
Yeah. Hello all. I went over to Roberts Cove briefly. There's nowhere really to tie up unless it's very high tide. But I guess it's got a bonus to it that there is a pub there that does have decent food as well. So it's I think it's only about 4.5 miles from the entrance of the harbour. So it's closer than most would think.
Did you actually tie up there, Dave?
I tied on just to the point there on the just looking at that photo there, the rocks just out the end. There's actually, I suppose, tying on points on the rocks, and the rocks are quite flat. You can sort of a bit of a natural pier there anyway. So you can land onto the rocks. And I just threw an anchor out the back and it was fine. And I think at pretty much all tides you can get into that point there. I suppose the point with the rocks coming down to the sea there. So yeah, no, it's a good spot. It's lovely.
Cool. Good stuff.
Dave, would it be safe enough that you could leave the boat there for kind of a half an hour?
Yeah, well, when I did it, I've actually been there a few times, and I've walked. I'm sure everyone's well aware of the walk in Roberts Cove, and yeah, you could leave it easy there for an hour or two. Go for a walk, and then if the pub is open, if we're not in COVID times, you can pretty much see the boats from the pub as well. So it's very safe to leave the boats there for an hour or two.
Just in case you don't know that walk, you've got the Coast Guard Cottage at the end here, and if you take a left after that, you go off up over the hill here. You can see the pathway over in the corner and off up over through the fields there. Very good. Okay, cool. Moving on to one which I haven't been to myself, but I've heard loads about, is Novel Cove. This is a view from Ian Fenner's wheelhouse here, I think, and I know a fun spot of Michael McCann's as well, at least. So do you want to talk about this one, Nats?
Yeah, just picking it up. I mean, obviously a bit further along west from Roberts Cove. Plenty of depth all the way in. Spectacular cliffs and stacks, as you can see there with the arches and everything else. And Michael will pick up a little bit more on the detail there. Just in the middle of the spot there, you can see the turrets in Novel Cove, which is, and the structure below it, which goes back, I think, to the late 1600s. Yeah, this was actually probably as recently as January, one of the good days we had at the early stage of the month. So very doable trip. One thing to watch, particularly for us power boaters heading down that way at the moment, there's a lot of pots out of all the sandy outcrops. So just to keep an eye on those. But other than that, very easy and well worth the trip. I did take an orange rib in there with a blue flashing light in it once upon a time on familiarization, and we actually had it in the caves and stuff. But Michael, I think you've had probably more success exploring it in a paddleboard.
Yeah, we went in there. We anchored the rib behind that small rock in the middle, right in that little pool. Just parked it there, dropped a hook in there, yeah, and then we were able to go around and paddleboard underneath that archway there. And we were in there, into there, and we were, and further along back east. Well, there's an amazing cave under that big rock to the left, and that really goes in quite a long way. And when you do go in, beware, be a load of birds will fly out against you. But other than that, it's worth going and have a look at. Yeah, but it's a stunning place. It's it's terribly sheltered. And the only thing is getting there. Obviously, in a rib, you'd want to pick your day. Because it's quite a long way. I mean, it must be. Is it 8 miles past, or maybe further than from the mouth of the harbour? Maybe longer. It's quite a long way.
Yeah, you're beyond. Yeah, you're well beyond. You're nearly at Oyster Haven, really, aren't you?
Almost, yeah.
Oyster Haven's around the corner again, but that said, I suppose if it's out of the west or any there, it's generally fine unless you're crossing Rocky Bay, because obviously there's quite a big fetch there. Yeah. From shore out to the direct line between two headlands, but yeah.
But on a sunny day, it's fabulous, and nobody can get at that bit there. They're in to the right. People can get at that from the land, but this bit actually is only accessible if you swim around or by boat.
Very good. Definitely one on my list. I think James, you've come back in, have you?
Yeah, sorry, just got booted out there.
You left us hanging on the most important tip, I think it was.
Well, what's the tip?
We were waiting for it.
No, that tip was go there.
Oh, was that it?
That's very disappointing, James.
No, I said worth the trip as well.
No, you said you just bought something during the week, I think. Did you not?
No.
I don't know.
No.
It was definitely something.
Oh, sorry. Top tip, yeah. A paddleboard paddle. 8 foot long. So I don't know if anybody's had problems with rib paddle, we're paddling on ribs. Whereas if you have an 8 foot long paddle, it's certainly as good as a depth gauge. And you can also, it propels a rib or a small hard boat as well. So 50 quid paddleboard paddle, buy one, because you can sound yourself up creeks like this, and you can propel yourself as well, unlike the short paddles that don't work. That was our top tip.
Good stuff. We skipped yours.
Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah. You say that anybody who's intending to go up the river up to Manan Bridge, on behalf of Carrigaline, Crosshaven and District Gun Club, they'd want to keep their heads down. Okay, just want to let you know that.
More of a swan than a duck, but hey ho.
The aim is starting to go off a bit, is it? Very good, James. We skipped the Smuggler's Cove. We said we'd keep it for you. Do you want to keep going there and pick it up?
Yeah, just very quickly, again, paddleboarding around the area, I did discover, very interestingly, Here's Ringabella Beach. Oh, you can't see my cursor. So if you go around the corner from Ringabella Beach there, there's one particular cove which I found very interesting. So the left-hand shot, the right-hand shot is just a blown-up version of where the left-hand arrow is. So what first attracted me to it was that sheer wall. There's definitely 8 odd feet there, maybe more, 12 feet at high water. So on going in there in low tide, I discovered that there's steps on the rocks, and if you look carefully in just in the greenery there, there's an indentation in the valley. So it was either used as a landing. It may not have been for smugglers, it may have been for fishermen or whatever, but it's an unbelievably engineered little cove. I mean, on a given day, certainly I've brought ribs in there. You'd bring a big boat in there quite easily. Just if you're going there, there's a rock in the middle, so don't bring your 40-footer in there day one. But the line as well to approach is probably from Roach's Point, a back bearing from Roach's Point. But I found it very interesting. You know, head in there in your dinghy, have a look for the old. There's steps carved into the rocks, and there's a pathway up. I'm sure maybe some of the elder members might have a story about it, but I found it amazing anyway.
Very good. And you kids could do the jumping off the wall there and everything, could they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very clean, certainly at high tide. But if you're going to venture in there in anything bigger than your dinghy, do it. Just bring your paddleboard paddle. I think just in the middle of the bay, there's a small little rock, low water. You would catch it. Actually, where your cursor is there, I think it's maybe even surfacing. There's a little rock there, but certainly I was thinking of trying to bring herring in there, but the old insurance company has problems with this, and there's nothing to tie it off to. But absolutely, herring could sit there if there was something to tie her to. She could sit there comfortably. I'd just be worried about the wind picking up in the evening or something.
Happy days, good stuff. Okay, that covers the majority of West within reach of the places that we went to. Going the other way, going east.
Alex,
Yeah.
Alex, can I ask a question there?
Sure.
Back to Novel. You were talking, or Mike was talking there a minute ago about a cave that's accessible on paddle boards or kayaks. What kind of tide would want to be there to access those caves?
I don't know, Kieran, but I'd say, you know, pretty well. There seemed to be plenty of water there. Water wasn't the issue for sure.
Okay, so any tide to
any tides. You know, just getting in, and between those two rocks there, you know, if you're going in very slowly, and see that you can go. I think you can go from memory. You can go either side of that, that pointy rock in the middle to the right.
Okay.
I think you can go either side of that, but it's very narrow though. But there's plenty. The water isn't the issue; it's the narrowness.
Okay. Cheers. Thanks, Mike. Cheers for that.
Cool. Okay. Anyone else? Any questions on that one? No. Cool. Okay. Going east. Saki did a trip from Roach's Point to Tribulgan to Powerhead and on to Ballycotton on a glorious day last year. So, Saki, do you want to take us through that trip?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose it was a full day the way we tackled it, but it's kind of one of those pet picnicky type days in October, just before we put the rib away. So kind of we stopped off at Roach's Point just for a look more than anything else. So I think you can come down to probably the pictures there, Alex, and if you zoom into the left, you'll just see on the northern kind of shore of Roach's Point, there's a little landing slip there, which is a great little spot if you wanted to tie up and do a bit of a walk up around Roach's Point and have a look at kind of the lighthouse area and the shore side of things. Also, equally, if you've got kids that want to do a bit of a kind of a swim or anything like that, again, it's a useful place to tie up. You wouldn't be going in anything bigger than a rib or maybe a small motorboat like a Boston Whaler or something like that, just because it's very tight next to the landing. But it's like with a southerly breeze or anything of that nature, you're well sheltered in there. And then for larger boats, there's kind of plenty of moorings outside it or otherwise. So again, you know, you're talking about probably half tide upwards because it gets very shallow and there's kind of rocks underneath. But kind of the picture there gives you a good feel for kind of exposure at half tide type territory.
There's a ledge or something there below that then, isn't there, from memory?
There is a small ledge, yeah, and there's the rocks you can see just to the left-hand side. So kind of a natural inlet there, yeah. So the rocks there versus the kind of the landing slip is your entrance point. But even just slightly to the right of that rock, there's there you can see rocks starting to crop up underneath it. So it is quite tight. So nothing wider than a kind of a 2.5, I suppose, beamed rib would really be fit for going in there. But lovely spot just to pop off and, you know, sit and watch the world go by for an hour or two. So that was Roach's Point. We kind of came around the corner then and we popped into Trebalgan. So again, half tide kind of upwards probably is your optimum, particularly from kind of coming alongside the pier, which you can see there. So just to note, if you are making an approach in there, it's probably best to come in from a due south approach. That's the fairest and the kindest access point from what's underneath you. There's a fair degree of shoaling on both the eastern and the western approaches. So literally go out and come due south in from what you can see the center of the bay itself. On the pier, you're very limited, just to note, on tying up points. There's kind of maybe one metal stake, I think, on one of the steps, one of the higher up steps on the pier. So, you know, it might be worth bringing a sandbag, or you could throw an anchor or something up on top of the dock if you were stepping off for a while or going for a bit of a meander. But another lovely spot just to go in and potter and sit and watch the world go by outside as well. So that's kind of Trebalgan, but again, less than half tide. I wouldn't really go in there. Just it shoals out, and it's not as attractive because you're getting into the pier to tie on would be a challenge at that stage. Okay, moving further east, we popped into to a haunt that Jim McGinley, I don't know if Jim is on, but Jim gave us a shout out on this one. I kind of often looked at it from further afield, but had never gone into the 42 steps, as it's affectionately known. So you can just about make out the pier there, but I think Dave is going to talk about it in a bit more detail. He did a specific trip to it, so definitely worth going in there. But again, you'd be limited as to the vessel you'd want to go in ribs or small motorboats, or else anchor off and go in a tender. So I'll let Dave talk through that, and if I have anything that I think of afterwards to chip in with, we'll do so. So we came out of there and went around the corner, past Powerhead, heading east. So we passed the ghost ship on kind of I suppose midstream between Powerhead and Ballycotton. So I suppose depending on what you're heading east in, if you're in obviously something of a larger nature, yacht-wise or otherwise, you probably want to stay outside the Smith's Buoy on the way down. If you're in a rib or something smaller, you can probably navigate your way inside it. But again, from a weather perspective, really anything kind of a northerly influence and you know, lightish winds, you'll have a lovely trip. Anything more sea orientated, it may be bumpy. So what I'd say is, if you're going, you can see from the picture there, Ballycotton Harbour, pick your day. We were just very fortunate at the end of October. We got an absolute gem of a day. So coming in around Ballycotton Island, we approached it initially from the easterly aspect, so went right around the island for a good look at it, and then came into the inner harbour. So you can see there from the inner harbour, there are areas to tie up. Potentially, as you look on the right hand side of that picture there, you'll find a lot of trawlers tied up alongside the pier quay wall there. And the fishermen there can be a bit touchy at times. So if you are tying up, just make sure you engage with them and find out what their movements are like. Alternatively, outside the breakwater, which is to the left hand side in front where the lifeboat is there to the north, there are a number of mooring buoys there that you could pick up on as well, and it's a safe anchorage there on the northerly side, pretty well sheltered. And then again, if you're in something like a rib, you can see there where the yellow rib and the couple of motorboats are tied up. There is a pontoon there, which they have a notice on kind of saying it's a set down pontoon. But equally, you know, if you're only going to be there for an hour or so, which is all we were there for, you know, I'm not too sure that you'd have any great objections to tying up it does shallow off depth-wise, literally in front of where the rib is there. So you get to that point pretty much at kind of low water where the boats are tied up. Anything further in and you're kind of heading into grounding territory. So just know what you're doing tide-wise when you're going in there. Ballycotton as well is a lovely spot. There was very little open the day we were there because of lockdown and all that fun stuff. But you know, there's a lovely cliff walk up there, up to the Mary Stanford lifeboat, which is the famous lifeboat that went out to the Daunt lightship in 1936 and saved the 6 guys off the lightship when she was after breaking her mooring. So that's well worth a trip from a history point of view. And there's 1 or 2 lovely bathing, swimming, jumping in spots as well, just up from the pier on the cliff walk as well. And you can see that shot looking back towards Power Head in the distance and one of the container ships coming out. So that was really a pet day. But like, you could spend a whole day in Ballycotton if you wanted it, plenty to do there. And then we came back out on the return trip and went on the inside sound. So on the western side of the of Ballycotton Island. Again, you can go through there. You pretty much, even at low water, have about 2 meters of depth, but stay closer to the Ballycotton Island side of the sound if you're transiting through the actual sound. And again, if there's any kind of rolly sea, just go around the island. You're better off because it can be quite bumpy in the sound itself. But again, back to Crosshaven, it was probably about 18 or 19 miles. So in something like a rib, if you're averaging 20 knots, it's a very comfortable trip. You'd have it done in an hour. But again, if you're in a yacht, you're talking about probably 3-hour trip or thereabouts comfortably. But definitely a trip worth doing going east, and plenty to do there.
Saki, could I just ask you, when you're referring to small motorboats,
yeah,
point on that, and what about the draft?
Yeah, I suppose, Paul, if you're coming into the pier area,
I'm not talking about so much Ballycotton, but when you were talking about the 42 steps and so on, you were talking about small motorboats. So I'm not sure what your reference point for that is.
Yeah, Paul, I'd say you're really talking about kind of a rib, you know, of maybe up to kind of 6.5, 7 meters type territory would be okay, because the 42 steps, the entrance there is very narrow. There's a kind of a concrete pillar that marks the entrance, and you kind of leave that on your starboard hand side as you're entering into the small pier that's there. But it is a very, very narrow channel. That shot shows it perfectly. So you can see the column that's there perched on top of the rocks. So you're leaving that to starboard as you're coming into where the boat is tied off the pier, and you can see the gap that you have between the 2 rock ledges. So that is the width of your channel. So you can see there's a yacht moored outside. So again, you know, if you were coming in your yacht, Paul, you'd be anchoring off, and you come in a dinghy would be the best thing.
It's very much rib territory rather than inboard motorboats.
Yeah, I mean, you can see Dave's motorboat is there now, but it's a small motorboat that's tied off the pier inside. But you know, anything less than half tide, and you can see how shallow it gets there and how rocky it is underneath. So really half tide upwards is where you're at. But I wouldn't be going in kind of a 30-foot motorboat. You're really talking about, you know, 6-7 meters less.
Okay, thanks a million.
And an ability to trim the engine, I think, would be important as well.
Yeah, you couldn't really go, I wouldn't go in there in a fixed engine down.
Okay, thanks a million.
Yeah. Okay, so that was kind of the trip east as far as Ballycotton and back. So not sure if anybody's any other queries on that, or we revert back to you, Alex.
Yeah.
Zach, it's in here just probably for people not familiar with the coastline east along. As you go past Revolgan and head past Guyleen, heading for Powerhead, that's actually quite a dirty bit of coast in close to the shore. It's a bit like Rocky Bay's mirror image. There's quite a long stretch of rocks out there, so you just need to give that quite a berth. It shoals all the way in there at low water.
Is there?
Good point, yeah.
Nin O'Leary said to me he thinks he remembers putting a pint in a pub in there as a kid. Can you go into a pub in there?
There's certainly a slipway there, yeah.
The slip there, yeah.
But you wouldn't be approaching from the southeast. It's filthy to the west of the slipway.
Yeah, it's the Guyleen Arms or something like that, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, you'd want to kind of go due south and maybe a bit of east of south to come in there, I would have thought. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Alex,
Dave, yeah.
Alex, can you hear me there, Brian Cutmore?
Yeah, hi Brian.
Just one thing you want to bear in mind about the 40 steps is really only suitable for an easterly wind. It's quite exposed to anything from the west.
Yeah, very valid point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It looks like that's...
Just another little story too about Ringabella. As a kid, we used to go to Fountainstown in our holidays. And in those days, there was no pubs around. The nearest one to Fountainstown was inside in Crosshaven, except for Ringabella. There was a little shebeen pub called Sean O'Mall's. And to get from Fountainstown across there, there was a fellow called Charlie who ran a ferry across from Fountainstown to Ringabella at the point. And what you'd have to do in the evening is you'd have to walk down to the beach in the back strand in Fountainstown and whistle vigorously for about 10 minutes. And he used to live in a little cottage overlooking the pier, and he'd come down and row across and collect you and bring you up to Sean O'Mall's. But the trouble was that Charlie was a very unreliable character, and you come 11 or 12 o'clock when people wanted to come home, he could be missing. So the only way you could make sure of getting a lift back to Fountainstown was you brought Charlie up to Sean O'Mall's with you, and you fed him with drink for the night. The trouble is, when you came back down to go back to Fountainstown, invariably he was so drunk he couldn't row the boat. So the people who he brought across used to have to row the boat back themselves. And Charlie used to get some way across in the morning to retrieve the punt for himself, his ferry boat. So,
now, Brian, I hope you were over 18 when you were doing this now.
Sorry?
I hope you were over 18 when you were doing all this.
I wasn't. It was my father in those days.
Happy days, great stuff. Story, and feel free to jump in here, anybody with some good stories like that. Powerhead, Dave, kind of one of your favorite spots. I don't think there's a lobster left down there. Do you want to have a chat with us about this? This is this picture could be in a promotional brochure or something like that, but this is Dave's boat here, and his friends, I think, on the pier. Do you want to have a chat, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm only discovered Powerhead this year, and it was actually Jim McGinley mentioned it to me. That photo's taken about, I think about an hour or two after low water, so the tide's coming in there. And as you come in, that post, you can see the concrete post. It's actually best to stay close to that, leaving on your starboard side. It is a lot easier to get in there at low water because you can see the rocks at low water, and they're quite exposed. And compared to high water, it looks completely different. The post is almost gone from the water, and you know, from the seabed to the top of the rocks is about 2 to 3 meters. So, you know, 1 minute, if you get it wrong, you can be in 4 or 5 meters of water, and if you vary to the left or right, you can only be in a couple of feet of water if you get the channel wrong. So it is worth going in there at a low water. It's, yeah, the water is very clear there. There's a lot of lobsters and spider crab there, especially to the south of it, and then up on top of Powerhead, it's actually quite a nice walk once you get to the top of the 40 steps. Again, obviously, it wouldn't be worth taking the risk going in there in any bit of a westerly breeze of any sort, because it's a tricky enough little place to get into at the best of times. But if there's anything from the north to northeast, it's usually quite sheltered.
So you said you went diving in there as well, Dave, did you?
Yeah, just actually, so that photo's looking directly west there, and to the south of Powerhead, there's, you know, I suppose you can't see it in this picture, but there's a lot of rocks with kelp, and there is quite a few lobsters there if you do have a lobster pot, and you know, you would see the odd spider crab as well, you know, in that photo where, you know, in that photo, a few of us have seen spider crab, and you can try catch them if you're brave enough. So no, there's plenty of I suppose wildlife around there, which is quite nice. And yeah, that's, I mean, it's a nice it's quite nice because it's, you know, you get the sunset there as well, obviously. And it's only, I think it's just over 3 miles from Roach's Point to Powerhead, or to, you know, to the 40 steps. So it's not far, but you wouldn't want to be doing it in any sort of weather.
Yeah, good stuff. Great. Okay. Thanks, Dave. I'm going to talk about a trip that I did. This was actually a stag back in August. With the restrictions that were there, we had to, I suppose, put the thinking hat on and trip up to Cappoquin was what we decided on. So initially, the plan was we had three boats on the trip, and the plan was initially to go drive the boats to Youghal on the trailers, launch in Youghal, and then go up the river. But the day that was in it and the forecast that was there was brilliant. So two of us decided to go from Cork, and you know, Larry here was in the Antics van, so he drove down to Youghal, and he launched in Youghal. So as the guy said, it's relatively straightforward in that you go as far as Ballycotton where Saki was, and then around the lighthouse and into Youghal. It's the only thing when you're coming into Youghal is there is a sandbank, I would say, directly in line with the headland and with Youghal. So you do have to keep continuing to go east and then almost take a right, take a 90-degree left-hand turn into Youghal. But it's all in the charts and you'll see it all there. And it was a brilliant trip. It was took us about an hour and 15 minutes. So I think it was about 35 kilometers, something like that. So here we were at the ghost ship, as Saki was saying, which you passed along the way. This was us returning here, passing Ballycotton Island. Actually, Saki, we were wondering about Ballycotton Island, and can you go on it? We were chatting earlier.
That's Capel Island, I'd say, but it looks good, is it?
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Oh, Knockadoon, yeah.
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 Either of those islands, do we know? Can you go on them?
Yeah, you can go on Capel Island, but you've got to contact the Irish BirdLife Authority to actually get permission to go on. So, and I think they work in the written world, so you may have to
Right.
pen a letter to get permission from them. But on Ballycotton Island, there's definitely a crowd in off the pier in Ballycotton that do trips out to the pier. The thing I need to do a bit of digging around on, actually, just out of curiosity, maybe somebody else online might know, but whether you can actually go out and land there yourself, I'm not quite sure. Whether it's only you can go with the tour crowd from Ballycotton. So I need to do a bit of digging around on that.
Alex, Brian Cudmer here again, if I can come in.
Right.
My daughter Sally was down there during the summer, and they picked up one of the visitors' moorings outside Ballycotton, and they went out in their dinghy to the Ballycotton Island, and they were politely asked to leave by the people who do the tours from the pier out there. And just another bit of information there, going east from Ballycotton, there's lovely facilities inside Capel Island, a lovely pier and slipway and everything there. It's well worth a visit, in a rib or something like that.
Yeah, we passed that. It's almost a village, Brian, is it? Or there's a couple of houses
Yeah,
there.
a couple of houses there. Yeah. And nice cliff walks there. And down to the pier, there's nice seating and picnic tables and stuff.
Okay, we must check. We might.
When we were kids, we used to go over to Capel Island all the time. My father's first cousin kept goats. He was a local curate, and he used to keep goats on Capel Island. So he regarded that as his territory, basically. So we had loads of picnics there. There were lovely walks around the island and cliffs for kids to climb on and stuff like that.
Who is it?
Very good.
Eleanor Cudmore's iPad. You?
No.
Alex,
Okay.
can I just ask, where did Nin launch in Youghal?
So right in the middle of Youghal, there's I'm trying to remember. There's a new pub right on the quay there, in Youghal. So this is the main Youghal pier where there's a new jetty off it.
Right. Okay.
And we launched there. You want to be launching at half tide, because going up the river, I'll come to it in a minute, but you obviously want to be going on a flood tide. So probably from 2 hours after low tide, you can launch there. And where this picture is taken, just behind me, essentially, there was a load of coach parking.
Right.
And because there was no tours or anything going on last year, there was loads of parking there. So we were able to leave the boats and the trailers there. And the river itself, if you're in a planing boat, well, the river is as long as it is, right? But if it's about 20 kilometers, that sort of thing. So you get up to the top of the river in about an hour. So it's a very manageable trip when you launch in Youghal. Right. And so just over the top of the Antics van here, there's I don't think I have a picture. I don't have a picture of it, but there's a landing pontoon very similar to what would be in Passage West, or quite similar to what would be over in Spike Island. It has a code, but it's one of these ones that you can reach your arm around and you can just get in.
Push the button.
Yeah, exactly. So we tied the two boats that made the trip all the way onto that, and then launched, parked up there, and we went up to Ahern's for lunch, and we got the lunch in there, came back down, and then we went up with the flood tide, about 2 hours before high tide, I'd say. And if we look at it, so the River Blackwater, lovely stretch of water. Our aim was and our plan was camping up there for the night. So we did a bit of a recce with a guy I know from the Youghal Sailing Club, and he picked out this spot here on the right for us. But ultimately we went up all the way as far as Cappoquin, which I first did with my dad about 20 years ago, I'd say. So this second from the left image here is the 3 boats tied up at Cappoquin Rowing Club. That pretty much dries out at low tide. So we tied up there, had our lunch, sat around, had a few drinks. Some of the guys went up to the shop. There are pubs within probably 500-meter walk only of that rowing club. And there were rowers there at the time when we were there, and they were more than accommodating of us. So probably took us about, I'd say, 45 minutes from Youghal to go up. We were fairly leisurely. Villierstown would be the main landmark on the way up, which is about 2/3 of the way up. There's a lot of water skiing goes on in the river up there. There's actually a sailing club there. There's a small village just step back off the river, but there's a big quay there in Villierstown. And as you're going up again between Villierstown and Cappoquin, there's a big house called Dramana House, and there's a little inlet into the east on the right as you're going up, with an amazing bridge and gateway called Dramana Gate. So there's a number of these little tributaries that you can take off and have a little wander up along. There was no issue with speed either all the way up. You can go all the way up. And by way of air draft, there is one bridge just to the right of these new build houses, apartments here. So just right before Cappoquin, there's a bridge there, but no issues with air draft. But you do on depth. So you might get in about an hour and a half either side of high water up there. When we were younger, we used to go up in the rib, and we actually anchored the boat in the middle of the river here, and the various parents who were there with us would have swam in, and we stayed in B&B up there for the night and came back and went back down the river. But we found this lovely little camping spot here on the side of the river, which was just south of Villierstown. So we had the sun all evening. Boats were tied up to the quay wall here. There's a very strong flow there, I would say. So we needed plenty of fenders, obviously slack lines and so on. But yeah, we had this place to ourselves, sunshine, no midgets. It was a perfect spot. And in the morning, back down to Youghal then, and we had a car in Youghal who was able to go get fuel, because it is a drive to get fuel. And we did need it, so we refueled back in Youghal, dropped off a couple of people, and headed back to Cork. Then that was us coming back through Capel Island. So obviously, the trip from Cork to Youghal will be very weather dependent, but from Youghal upwards, it's very sheltered. You're in an open stretch between Youghal and the main bridge going to Dungarvan, but after that, a very sheltered stretch of water, and it's pretty much fresh water, a lot of it. It's a mixture, I guess, but lovely part of the world, lovely stretch of water with the new road down to Youghal as well. You could be there very quickly.
Alex, can I just ask, is the river fair all the way up, or are there any kind of, do you have to hug any particular sides, or is it reasonably clean?
No, it's reasonably clean, and on the outside of the corners, it's very deep as well. There's some sheer cliff walls on the outside of the corners. It's very, and you can nearly see the flows as well as you're going up.
Okay, great.
Some lovely old big country houses and so on up there. You see one of them has a boat lodge which is on Airbnb every so often. Lovely spot.
That's Ballinatray House.
That's on the way up, is it, Paul?
The way up, yeah, on the left-hand side going up. And
yes.
Just before you get there is ruins of Temple Michael Castle. I mean, we spent every summer of our life in Youghal, and we used to go up to the ruins of Temple Michael, and there's a sward of green below it. And we used to picnics and barbecues down there, and people would come along. A couple of the gang had boats with outboard motors, and they'd bring it up and tie onto the ground, really, an anchor, I suppose, on the ground, and come up and join us and go back again. There's some fabulous scenery on the way up, some big tower houses and stately homes, but Ballinatray is a fabulous house in itself.
Yeah.
And that boathouse you can rent. We've been there for a couple of New Year's Eves, Pauline and myself.
Oh, very good.
And it's a fantastic view from there down the river.
Yeah, lovely. And you take I mean it's because it's only 20 or so kilometers, you could take a slow boat and make a day trip out of it. Absolutely, as well. So that was Cappoquin, right almost on the doorsteps, if you like.
Alex, question for you.
Yeah.
Sorry, James here. What did you use to navigate the river? Is it charted, or what did you use?
It's as in Navionics will allow you to go to Villierstown, but it's not really charted. So Google Maps was the best thing. It's very straightforward in that. Having looked at it, having been there before, we knew we didn't have any issues until we got to the bridge at Cappoquin, probably just south of the bridge at Cappoquin. But Google Maps on the satellite view was the best thing for us.
Thanks.
And that's how we found some of our camping spots as well. There's some pictures which certainly wouldn't be safe for this forum as well, so we had good fun along the way as well. So that brings us back into Cork Harbour. I'm particularly looking forward to a couple of these ones. James is going to come back in here, take us through the Brennan Torpedo in Camden, and Cork Beg Island swimming pool, which I'm particularly fascinated by. Another trip around the island, which is around Great Island. Ian Venner and Pat Horgan and the families took a trip to all the bridges in Cork City. There's the new Hall Bowl and Amenity Park accessible from Paddy's Point, and then we'll touch on the various piers and jetties in the harbour as well. So over to you, James.
Thanks, Alex. Sorry, I've turned off my my video because I've got booted out of this meeting twice. Just a quick one. As a kid, I used to fish in Camden, and I got a bit obsessed with these two tracks that are in picture there, heading into the water, and did a little bit of investigation. And they are one of the first torpedoes. Well, the first guided torpedoes in the world were tested in Camden. Another bit of trivia. But you can see, if you look, this is a view from Camden Pier. You can see our beloved harbour in the background. Yeah, you can scroll down a bit, Alex. You can see the jetty in the background. So basically, there was two torpedo, and these are the old frames of the torpedo. You can see how they would have fitted together here on left of shot. Brennan was, I'm not even going to go there, but Brennan was an Irish guy, came up with a guided missile and tested it in Camden, which I found quite interesting. So we pass these things every day, and I decided to ask why. So there you go. Brennan torpedo tested in Camden, one of the first guided missiles in the world, apparently.
Did it work, James? Do you know?
didn't find my paddleboard anyway, Alex. So the other thing, while nosing around Cork Harbour, I discovered, and I know it's not news to many, but there's a I'm not going to say natural swimming pool. There's a swimming pool in Cork Beg carved into the rocks. As you can see, so I've just done a harbour view on the left-hand side there. That's roughly where, that is where it is at the point of the arrow. And then if you zoom in on the right, you can clearly see the shape of it. There it is. It basically, there was a hotel on the island before the refinery bought it. And it was, and before that, it was one of the old houses. So yeah, if you want to scroll on, that's it. Both of these shots are taken at quite low tide, not by me, Rob from the internet. I have landed kids there on a very still day onto that wall, actually on the right hand side. On a higher tide, that wall submerges. So beware on a very high tide because you could miss it. So I would have said on an hour before or high tide, you could put your nose up against that. I did land the kids there and bail out because there wasn't many places to tie, and I was unsure of the area at the time. Actually, looking at that picture, you could probably live with it, but it's quite full of barnacles, and you could damage any rubber or plastic that you might have. But the pool, yeah, as I said, at high water, it refreshes. So I think it's deliberate that on a extremely high tide, the water gets changed by seawater. So
The
yeah,
kids
I found
were they does it hold the water, James? Like, were the kids swimming around inside it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and that's it. You definitely in that shot, the seawater level is lower than the water level in the pool. So yeah, it does hold water for sure. The other thing it might be worth doing, and I don't know if anybody on the call has done it, land on the beach and walk out from the beach. I just was a bit worried about tying up there, so I've never tied a boat up to it. So has anybody on the call gone there?
Yeah, we tied up again. We tied it. We found something to tie up against there. I can't remember what, but we
Was
went
it at that wall, Michael?
Yeah, that wall. Yeah, and we walked around. We had a good walk around the whole headland bit there, and up those steps and around. So there was certainly something to tie on to. I can't remember what.
It was lowish time.
And we went in there. It wasn't. It was. I'd say half tide at most. I'd say.
But there wasn't much water in the pool.
Yeah.
You'd want to have a fairly peach of a day. There was a little bit of a lop there when I was there, and therefore I was a bit nervous and bailed, leaving children in the pool. But yeah, it's worth a venture for sure. But definitely only by dinghy or again, I'd be a little bit nervous of a rib unless it was a peach of a day. Is there another slide of it, Alex? I think there was.
No.
No. There was. If you want to Google it, there are some old shots online of the hotel, which was a kind of an estate house originally there. So that's they're my top tips for the Inner Harbour.
Good stuff. And I said I'd tag in Whitegate. So while we're talking about Whitegate, many people don't know, but in the types of boats we're talking about here, with trim-inted legends and so on, you can get into the wall in Whitegate at high tide and tie up anywhere along the wall. It's actually the last pub I was in before lockdown was the Schooner here in March last year by boat. But we tied up to the wall there. I think we were tied up around the lamppost. The wall looked better than the pier is quite broken up, I think, at this stage. But there's a couple of pubs in there. I know Tommy Doyer's on here, and he go in there quite often as well. But it's another option within the harbour. We were saying we could potentially have another webinar of its own of the various eating and drinking houses around the harbour. But that's one of them. Moving on to around the island. So a trip around Great Island. I'm going to cover this with some help from Ian Venner, who's probably knows technically the right way to go. Great Island, it's about 30 kilometers of a round trip. And pretty much you have to come in from the western side. If you try and approach, what I'm saying is the bit that's tricky is between Fota here and up around Radley's Yard, which is kind of in center picture here by Rossmore Bay. As you'll see here from this chart, it's very shallow and it dries out to mud at low tide. So what's recommended is you want to be at, and Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but you want to be at the bridges here in Fota an hour before high tide. You want to approach it from the west. And we'll see in a minute, there are 2 bridges that you need to come under, but really your only challenge here, there's 2 challenges. One is depth and the other one is air draft then when you get to the main Belvelly Bridge. And on this Google Maps satellite view image, you'll see it here really. So on the left here, we have the railway line bridge, the green one, which you could see from if you're heading upriver to the city, or if you're over in Passage West. You can see your channel flowing through here and through to Belvelly Bridge. But between Belvelly Bridge and this Weir Island area here is very shallow. And this is why it's best approached from the west rather than trying to find it from the east. Because there are reeds there. So the reeds do pretty much guide you through this area, but the charts obviously don't work. So actually Google Maps on the satellite view has taken it at low tide. So you're best to use Google Maps to get through here. Ian, any point I haven't missed there?
No, that's it. You probably will need springs because you can see there east of Belvelly Castle is very shallow. So you do need a lot of water. And air draft is not as much of an issue as you might think, and as you'll see from a couple of photographs following now, you've plenty of room under the railway bridges, and if you roll on another 1 or 2, you should see Pat Horgan's 585 complete with A-frame and everything else, and aerials comfortably passing under the centre arch of the bridge in Belvelly with feet to spare, and about, if I remember correctly, 15 or 16 feet underneath us at that stage, obviously scouring through the bridge. Quickly got down to about 3 feet, but yeah, you've about 4.5, 5 feet all the way in the channel to
Ian, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes, Brian.
You're talking about air height and draft. The thrombosis did round the island when our family owned her back in the year dot, and we had to go aground, going under the bridge, and wait until the water rose enough to allow us through, and it was kind of shit or burst as to whether we'd actually get through without crushing the wheelhouse. But we did. But the thrombosis did that trip, I would say, in about 1958 or 59.
Before my time.
Before Sinead's time. I wanted to get that in, I don't know why, but she did. Okay, drive on.
Jesus.
So plenty of draft there at the top of the tide, top and bottom, and then it's the next step as you go on is where it gets tricky, and you are really feeling it across. There's Belvelly Castle coming in there, and going from there, if you go north or east to the corner, there's a wall runs along the northern shore there, and it literally clear away the channel, and then you're clear away. Once you get to the right hand side there by Weir Island, you've buckets of water there again, staying on the northern side of the channel because there's a lot of old oyster beds to the south side of that channel. Once you get clear of Weir Island, but that's the tricky bit there on the screen.
Yeah. And there's a couple of landmarks along the way. Obviously, the bridges being the most important ones. Fota Castle is a fascinating place to go in and have a look around. There is actually a deep water quay. I don't know, is it a dry dock, Ian? It's more of a kind of a quay over here on the left hand side, but which is completely overgrown, unfortunately. But it'd be amazing to see that area cleared up a bit. You could land in there, the walls and so on are in good condition, but it's just totally overgrown. Belvelly Castle, of course. And as you pass Belvelly Castle, when things open up, you'll see in the top right here is Radley's boatyard. And
Alex?
as you, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick one, Ian. When you come through Belvelly Bridge, do the reeds essentially provide you with the channel? Is that your kind of guiding line once you go past that quay wall kind of on the left?
Not really. The channel is an awful lot. So you can see the green there is essentially the reed, and you can see the channel is a small fraction of that again.
Right.
It gives you something to aim at, but it's not definitive. You need to be feeling your way through there, really.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Is that a Google Maps shot? Presumably it is.
It is.
Yeah. I think I went through there when there was more water than you had, Ian, and I had to trim up my engine a small bit going through there. Now I could have been in the wrong place, but it definitely was shallow.
You
Yeah.
didn't have a paddleboard paddle, Alex.
I went through in the Zapcat before, but I think I was drawing about 2 centimeters doing 50 knots. So it didn't really matter.
Yeah, I definitely concur with going out from the west, because I went at it from the east, and it's quite hard to find the opening in the reeds.
Yeah,
from that side.
Yeah, I tried it in the rib years ago as well, actually, and we had to bail out.
It's a big expanse of water, and you do get a little bit lost in it, actually. Yeah, from the east.
But you see, and the reeds, all you're looking at is a bank of reeds, so you have to be at a particular angle to actually see the opening in. Otherwise, you're just looking at a full bank of reeds, and you don't know how to get at it. And I suppose the best part of going that way then is that you get to finish up the verse.
Did he read it?
Might have muted Tommy to the wire there.
You did. You muted me.
Yeah,
Al,
sorry. Yeah.
if you find Eddie English, would you ever ask him, does he remember the day that himself and his father and Joe landed a load of rocks down on top of us when we were going under it in the old salmon yawl that we had at the time? They tried to sink us. They very nearly did, but we escaped. But if Eddie's around, he'll remember it, I can tell you.
Actually, there's a shot in my in-laws' house of used to be around the island windsurfing race, and they'd have to drop their rigs going under the bridges. And there's a shot of my sister-in-law dropping a rig while racing around the island.
As long as that's all she dropped.
Hey.
Keep it clean, Tommy.
Mute him out.
Hang on, he's muted.
The only other quickie was about Debarra Castle. We need to know about where's the Debarra coming in here.
Yeah, I'm not strong enough on the history now. I know my old man is lurking in the background.
St.
I know, I'd
James is
say.
lurking somewhere, yeah.
But we want to finish before midnight.
Okay, drive
on. Yeah, along that the stretch of water really between that point and the turn down into East Ferry Harbour there's not a whole lot there. There's one harbour and there's a quay wall and there's the mussel beds as well, Ian, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. But you've oodles of water there. You could have 8-10 meters in places. So it's actually, and I know people have taken quite large yachts up around the corner there and anchored them overnight. It's quite, and again, obviously very sheltered in most breeze.
Yeah, absolutely. And
could I just say about that anchorage just round the corner in East Ferry, coming from the harbour side? We've been there lots of times and anchored overnight. And one night on a high tide, we came in and we anchored really quite close to the shore of Great Island. And in the morning, we couldn't get off. We put the anchor down over what was found out to be a medieval anchor from some 2 or 3 masted ship. So we had to drop everything and get a diver to reclaim our anchor and rescue us. So Cassidy was useful as always.
He didn't give you the other anchor, did he?
No, he said he was. I said, could he lift it up? We'd want it. And he said, there's no way we could have lifted it up to the boat. It was that big.
Jenny Mac. Well, they did sail ships up to Ballinacurra, I suppose. So.
Well, we've been all the way down to Ballinacurra. On a high tide, you can sail right down into Ballinacurra village. So it's a lovely trip.
Yeah.
Yes. In the punt. Yeah, that was a punt rather than a rib. It's quite shallow, but it's quite easy to find the thing, really.
Yeah, we get the 18s up there with the boards fully down at the right time. So that's around Great Island. That's a very good one. It's a good trip. It's 30 kilometers or so. So yeah, you'd want to be leaving a bit of time. I know the Rankins did it as well, maybe last year or the year before, I think. The bridges, all the bridges. This was one you undertook, Ian.
Yeah,
that sounds like boredom at its best.
It was actually early in lockdown last year, so we weren't quite so bored yet, but we thought it was a good idea. So that's Derek, mine and family in the rib ahead of me there, 4.8, and I had Brian Horgan with me as well. And we
leave the phone down.
We hit the North Channel first about 2.5 hours after high water, and they were relatively small tides. You need to leave that amount of tide go out so you get actually clearance on the bridges. We were scraping through 1 or 2 of them with the flexible VHF aerial, but certainly fitted and I'm on a 585 Ribcraft, so reasonably sizable. And then so we went all the way up on the North Channel to the Lee Maltings, right around by the Mercy Hospital, where we still had about 4.5 feet of water. There is a weir slightly up from that. So then we turned around and came down, and we went up the South Channel, and you can see there that's Derek on the western side of Parliament Bridge, just off Electric. I followed through, and he had still enough water. I just about clipped a pipe that runs across the river there. That was probably about 4 hours after high water, and it was just getting tight at that stage. So generally plenty of draft, and it was a really interesting trip and a very different way to see our city. And then we tied up on the Port Cork pontoon and strolled into town for suitable refreshments, shall we say?
So the Mercy on the northern side, and how far on the southern side?
That's as far as we got on the southern side, but there is a weir and a couple of pipes running across there, which make it difficult.
Okay, yeah. I kayaked from the dam down to Monkstown one time, and we went on the northern side as well, because I think that southern side is dodgy, isn't it?
Can I just say, just watch out for shopping trolleys as well, by the way.
Make sure you have your shots.
Yeah, exactly.
We have experience of damaging a prop on a shopping trolley up onto the bridges.
Ruth, you need a paddle.
I have it.
I got a paddle.
Thought you'd have been swimming it.
No, not my cup of tea.
Well, they actually give everybody a can of Coke, don't they, after the Lee swim?
Yeah, can of Coke.
This is something about the Lee and something about Coca-Cola, if you ask me.
Do you know, I would do it. I just have the heebie-jeebies about swimming under all of those bridges.
Yeah. Well. Very good. Okay.
And sorry, and there's a thing about Mars bars and the Lee swim as well, isn't there, Ruth?
I wouldn't.
Not that I know of, Mum. I'll stay out of that one.
You know of it.
She laundry. Alex, is a good time to mention about the ownership of the marina now?
We'll cover that at the Ian's going to cover all the
all
the harbour things at the end. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't read ahead.
We can just come out.
So this is a new there's 2 new amenities available to us here. So this is Ringaskiddy, just where the bridge goes over to Haulbowline Island, and Paddy's Point is a new development here by the Port of Cork. And here you can see Ian's boat, and that gives access to the walkway. So Ian was there recently enough, I think. Well, obviously, because it only opened recently. But do you want to talk about that one, Ian?
Yeah, perfect. So we went across at low water, at dead low water, actually, as it happened. So you can see me there alongside, I think at about 2 meters at that stage. It wasn't a huge tide underneath me. There's a shallower bump where you probably have about 1 meter under datum, about 50 yards off the pontoon. But would have come through the south channel of the bridges to get to there, so relatively natural. The pontoon is very robust.
Sentimental means it's important. Not worth that much money, but it's very
important. The pontoon there is quite solid, and the pier and slipway there is fantastic. So again, for people on trailers and looking for alternative launch sites for whatever reason, an excellent facility. And then around onto the amenity park itself, you see on the bottom right, there's about a 1-kilometer-long loop on the outside, and there's a couple of shorter loops on the inside. And it's a really different view of Cove, a different view of the rest of the harbour, and well worth the stop and the stroll over the bridges to see it. Yeah.
And there's nice picnic benches and so on here in Paddy's Point itself as well, isn't there?
Yeah. You can see the green area and the tracks and everything. It's a super facility and a huge amount of ground there as well.
Yeah, and within 5k as well.
Yes.
Good.
One thing I did notice, Ian, it's a serious slipway and a serious amenity, but it's short. There's a serious shortage of places to tie up along the slip itself. If you were to try and dry out in the slip, there's serious lack of bollards there.
I'd say you wouldn't be trying to dry out in the slip.
Why?
I suspect you'd want to be chatting to our friends in the Port of Cork about that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, no, I'm just saying if you were to launch or whatever, I mean, I'm not even going there as regards permissions, but there's a serious lack of tying points. Yeah. So if anybody is trying to bail out there or whatever, there's that's the only thing that was obvious to me.
And I think that's why they put such a substantial pontoon that's, you literally just launch and you'd have to go to the pontoon.
And that's not to be confused with the NMCI pontoon as well. That's separate and private, which is just out of the shot there to the west. Okay. Carrigaline, this one just came through this morning, actually. People might have seen some kayakers, or more kayakers than normal, on the Owenabee River in the last couple of weeks. And Jack O'Keefe, who many will know in his Drascombe, said to me that there is a growing group of keen kayakers and canoeists forming in the Carrigaline area. And actually they've started marking out the channel between Coolmore and up as far as the abattoir here in Carrigaline. So they've already put in a couple of perches here. You'll see the red markers here. I don't know exactly what they look like. I must go up at some stage, but I think they've got 3 new red markers here. And they've got a blue perch which they've put in here. So it is actually possible to get all the way up to the abattoir there. There's a bit of a pier there. And I know they're looking at trying to develop that area in the future so that boats can get up there. I think, Dave Kennefick, you've gone up and done your shopping up there or something, have you?
I haven't done my shopping, but yeah, I've been there. I tied onto just across from Lidl there, the little park, just tied onto a park bench and threw an anchor out the back, and I met a friend for a coffee, all right, in Hassets, which was quite nice. But if you're driving over the bridge on the way to Crosshaven at low tide, the last time I checked, I think there's actually a shopping trolley exactly where I parked. So that shopping trolley might need to be moved before that quay wall gets much more use.
I had a look when I was passing earlier, and I did see something there, whether it was a rock or trolley or something, but it is possible, certainly possible to get up there, and by the looks of what these guys are doing, it could be more possible in the future as well. Okay, so that kind of rounds out the trips, right? And just what we wanted to do was just touch on, finally for the evening, touch on some of the key jetties and piers that are within the harbour. And Ian Venner is going to bring us through these, and anyone can feel free to jump in. But I guess what we're just wondering here is who owns them, what's the deal with access, how do we get codes, etc. So Ian, do you want to skip us through these?
Yeah, we'll start there. Just, I suppose, top right, Paddy's Point we touched on. It's not a place to overnight, but it's certainly a set down and leave for a short while. As we said, super facility. Moving, we'll say clockwise around the page, then Monkstown. Obviously, you have a couple of spots there. You've the Sand Quay, which is quite shallow. You've a slip north of the main pier in Monkstown, which is actually quite good with a shot, I think, coming up later. And then you have the marina itself in Monkstown, which has good access. And yeah, sorry, the Monkstown pier there and the rowing, what's called the pier, the rowing slip is.
Yeah, that's me at that. I went to the Bosun for dinner one night, and we had 2 or 3 hours there, I'd say, at a good tide. And
is there much depth? Does that dry out, Alex?
It does dry out, but there's loads of depth there when the tide. So you get 2 hours either side at high tide.
Very good. So obviously the pontoon and marina in Monkstown as well. And I believe there may be a set down charge on that, so just be careful of that one.
Yeah, worth ringing James O'Brien, whose numbers are online. If you are going into Monkstown Marina, be more than hospitable, but appreciate the call.
Yeah. Ahada then probably one of our more regular stopping off points, and they've built out quite a substantial jetty there now over the course of a couple of years. Plenty of room on the outside and plenty of depth on the outside. It does shallow as you go towards the pier on the inside. So that typically tends to be smaller ribs and boats, but on the outside there you've reasonable water at all stages of the tide. Moving to Passage, there's another, I suppose, council pontoon at Passage. There is a code on the gate. I think the code is on the leeward side anyway. So
I was there in October. I don't think it's actually working.
Oh, so there's no code at all.
Mechanism is bust on it or something. Yes, it seems to be open all the time.
So that's again, it's a good break-off point between if you're traveling from the kind of lower harbour up to the city, or indeed around the island or whatever. It's another handy stopping point. Cove, I'll call out 2. The Quays is the one there at the bottom with the higher boats there on the inside of the pontoon. So that's quite a solid pontoon. Again, good depth there, particularly on the outside. Probably one to just be careful of in a southerly, and or if there's a lot of traffic in the harbour, it gets a bit lumpy there. And obviously it does belong to the Keys Bar, so it would be rude not to frequent their establishment when we are free to do so again, if you're availing of the facilities.
And worth mentioning, the building to the next to it there was Clubhouse of the Royal Cork for many years before it moved to Crosshaven.
Absolutely. Now the Serious Museum to the east of and at the extreme eastern end of the picture there, and out of shot on Kennedy Quay, there's been a new pontoon go in, which is ideally designed to serve the Spike Ferry. You can see it there, center in the picture now. It's a substantial ferry pontoon, clearly for use by the ferries. However, on the inside of the pontoon, there is probably 50-60 feet of set down area, where you are allowed to set down for an hour. The boat must be manned, and you must be able to slip at short notice for emergency access and all the rest. But again, that's a very good way of getting to the very center of the town of Cove, up for an ice cream or a coffee or whatever you're having yourself. So that's a good addition as well to the stopping points on the island. I'd say Cork City next. So again, a lot of us would be familiar with this. Accessible all stages of the tide. Plenty of length in it there, as you can see. Up to very recently owned by the Port of Cork, and always very welcoming of visitors from near and far. In recent weeks, it's been bought by the Tower Holdings Development Company, who are looking to develop that whole site. We understand the access will be maintained, but in terms of what the longer term position is, we don't know. There is a code on that, or certainly there was a code on that. While the port had it, and that was certainly a code that you needed to get out of there and around the Port of Cork building and out onto the road. Not sure what the updated position is on that just yet, but I'm sure they'll be maintaining that access for us. And then finally, I suppose on the right, we've got Spike Island. There you can see the pontoon just at the bottom of the picture. Again, it is a ferry pontoon. The ferries do run in there, but in and out on the northern edge of it, so on the left as we look. So you essentially have the other sides to moor on, and very little issue with water at all stages of the tide. There is a code on the gate. I'm not sure, again, like some of the others, whether it works or not anymore.
You can reach your hand around it.
That's right, yeah. There's a great walk all the way around the island. We've done it several times during lockdown. We've had picnics over there, just where, if you to that corner of the island is a lovely grassy area. They have picnic benches, you can stop there. There's plenty of grass and green area. There's a playground on the right hand side of the island as we look at it there. And obviously then you can go in and around the fort itself. I know initially you weren't allowed to land on and go straight to the fort, but I think they, before lockdown happened, had made some arrangements whereby you could contact them in advance, land on the pier or the pontoon and pay and get tickets. It wasn't a full, you didn't have to come by ferry to get in. So well worth a visit, and definitely well worth doing the tours when they restart again.
Yeah, and you can just tie up to the pier on the inside as well if there's water there.
Yeah.
Just before you go off that, Ian, I watched Shawshank Redemption in the prison there one night, so there was a kind of a rolling deal where you got on a ferry in Cove and went and watched the cinema. It was very good night out actually, and pitch dark, all very good.
I was going to ask you what you were serving time for, but I'm glad you clarified it.
Oh yeah, I only watched it for a night.
Yeah.
Alex, just on the Port of Cork facility there, the Deputy Harbour Master, Nicholas Burke, was quoted recently in Float magazine by saying that the new owners, there's a lady called Alison Lee, and she can be contacted. There's a Cork telephone number for her, and there's an email address for her, which I have on both. So I can bang it on to you there later, Alex, and you can send it on to the others.
I think thanks for that, Dino. Yeah, it's on the it's already actually on the club site. I stuck it up as an article in the last week or two. Same thing that a float has, so her name is on that. So that's a good shout. If you go onto royalcork.com and scroll down through the news articles that you see on the front, should be there hopefully.
Yeah, I suppose the advantage previously with the port was you could talk to port ops or indeed Tivoli at 24/7, so it made it really easy. Probably needs a little bit more advanced planning now under new owners.
Yeah, Colin Moore had just posted in the Colin Moore had posted in those details there as well. Thanks, James.
Just as I finish off, Alex, there, I popped in a link into the chat, which is the Infomar website, which is a very detailed survey of the harbour and many other parts of the coastline, and it is really, really good at looking at the depths and channels around the harbour. It's an amazing website, actually, well worth having a look at if you're going exploring areas.
Perfect. Last couple then, Ian, were just a couple of piers. You've covered two of them already, I think, maybe.
Yeah, great shot there of a few tied up in Fox's cover. That's one where you do need the top of the tide. I'm not sure how long ago some of those shots were taken because the
piers were better now.
So you do need to know where you're going to see the fender board and everything else that's out on the side of the boats there. So you do need to be careful going alongside, but at the top of the tide, yeah, you've plenty of water, as you can see there. That's a 35 or 40 footer alongside there. In the center there, you've got Balnacurra, which was mentioned already. That is again a top of the tide trip. You do have plenty of water up there. There is quite a channel there in it, but it is marked with milk cartons, or certainly was when I took Ger and Gary Frost and one or two others up to Balnacurra to swim as far as Cove. Don't ask me why, I just did the boating. And there's acres of quaywall space there. There's loads of it. And then finally the camber and Cove. And you mentioned the pontoon, but also you've got the cambers inside. The West Camber tends to be quite a busy commercial one with line boats and everything else running in and out of it. The East Camber is a little bit quieter there, or the eastern of those two cambers is a little bit quieter, but again, it's quite busy area, a lot of boats, a lot of lines. But you do have access to you can see there's a slip running up either side of it there, like either side of the roadway out to the T. So
if there's anyone with mobility issues, so to speak, on this kind of hammerhead here facing east, there's a decent steps there now, so you can drop people there, and then if you had a motorboat, you could tie up next to the rope boats, or you can go into the slipways as well.
I'd actually, if I was landing there now, Alex, I'd actually land onto the pontoon that's obviously not shown in this picture.
Yeah.
It's a much more solid access point, and you can then slip off, as you say, and tie up somewhere properly.
Yeah, perfect. And the last one is...
We've covered that one.
And East Ferry.
East Ferry, sorry, I was out of shot. So East Ferry, probably one of the most frequented piers by all of us and many others on the call here. Reasonable amount of depth there, but certainly difficult to access at anything below half tide, just because it's a long way up to the pier. It's been relatively recently refurbished, so there's very good piling on it, and it's quite easy alongside there. And there's a stone pier as well to the north, to the left there, as we look at the pier. And again, that's ideal at half tide plus, and a great spot to get up and go visit Murph's Tavern whenever they can reopen.
So again, you see both of those in many of these piers as well. You're going to need a couple of longer lines with you than you would normally have to account for the tide and funny and unusual tying up spots, I suppose. So that's it. We'll ask a couple of questions in a sec, but again, just looping back to Eddie there. So Eddie would have given inspiration to many of us for these trips, so thanks to him for that. He has his Hidden Harbour course coming up quite soon. I think it was advertised on Facebook today, possibly even, so worth taking a look there. As people might be thinking of any questions that they might have, lads on the panel, if you like, is there anywhere not here that you would like to get to this summer? Any spots that we haven't covered that you think would be good?
I think if we got to everywhere on the seminar, we'll have a good summer ahead of us.
Yeah,
I think we should have a competition, and someone should have a beer in every spot, and there'll be a prize at the
Hi,
end.
James.
Orienteering.
There's just from paddleboarding early mornings, just around the corner from that little hidden cove in just west of the harbour. There are a number of caves worth having a look at. I'd say probably a kilometre west of Ringabella, just around that area. It's kind of an area that none of us kind of park up at, but it's definitely worth. If you're in Ringabella and it's too busy, push on a bit. There's a number of caves. I'd say kilometre west.
And I suppose the other thing, Alex, I'm sure I speak for others here. Anyone who wants more detail on the how and the where of getting to any of these places, by all means, give us a shout. More than happy to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, use my email address if you don't have anyone's direct contact details. But absolutely, we were light there. Wanted to cover the areas really as much as we could. So do feel free to give us a buzz. This was a good session, and I think it just shows the level of interest of nearly 100 people. So there's there's a lot of motorboats out there, and I think next year is the
I want to buy a motorboat.
Next year is the 100th anniversary of the Cork Harbour Motor. What's the term? Cork Harbour Motor Yacht Club. So that'll be an interesting one in 2022. So I'm sure we'll look to do something to mark the occasion then.
And I suppose the important piece of that is the club that originally built the clubhouse that the Royal Cork is now sitting in. So it merged with the Royal Munster, which obviously then subsequently merged. So another linger history.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, people are dropping off there, but feel free to ask any questions if anyone has any.
I think that was a fabulous webinar. It really was great. Really worth listening. Thanks again.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for the input and the stories along the way as well. Cool. Okay.
No, Alex.
Yeah,
Brian Cotmore here. Just a small one there is you're dealing mostly with ribs and smaller power boats tonight. But if you get a dirty day when it's blowing a hoolie from the west and you can't go to the usual haunts like White Bay, or it's too dirty to get out to Ringabella, there's actually a superb beach, Loch Beach, between Ringaskiddy and the woods in Corrabini. It's an absolute beautiful beach.
Yeah.
Surely you must be familiar with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we used to go there and Monkstown picnics every year nearly. And it's a great beach. I think Dave Kennefick was windsurfing there today. I think, Dave, were you?
Sorry?
Unmute.
Dave Kennefick was
close. I was on that beach actually today, or close enough to it. There's a couple of very small little beaches there, and one large one called Loch Beach.
The large one is probably 300-400 meters long.
Yeah, at least I would have thought. Yeah.
Beautiful sandy beach.
Yeah, lovely spot.
It's it's beautiful. Quite shallow going in there at low tide, because there's not much, I guess, slope in the seabed. So it's a worthwhile trip.
Yeah.
Mute yourself again now.
Okay, great stuff. 8:30. That's a good time, I think. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to all the contributors, everyone for joining. As I said, I've been recording it, so I'll try and pull it down and get it up onto YouTube for others to see. And I would have emailed you the link today, so I'll actually put that presentation into an article, put it in the newsletter, put it on the website, and so on, so you can go back and refer to it and have a look at it. So hopefully we can all get
really
back out.
I just want to say thanks a million to everyone who participated and who gave input. It was very informative and very enjoyable.
Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, Kieran.
Alex, can I just ask one quick question? It's Dominic Baxter, maybe to point to Ian. The pier or the pontoon down by Poggy Queeve, the one that's owned, well, I don't know if it's owned by the rowing club or owned by the council. Does anyone know the deal with that?
That's I believe a public access pontoon, the one that's closest to Parky Queeve, but it's locked. So yeah, not one we've landed on, or can land on in terms of the access. There is one or two other lighter pontoons, kind of the floating green blocks, further upstream, and they're okay to drop someone off on. There's a car park close by if you're picking someone up or whatever. But yeah, there seems to be a little bit of confusion over the bigger pontoon there.
Yeah, it's actually got a physical keyed padlock on it of late. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Ian, I think you're mistaken there. I think we actually did land once for a specific dog to have a bio break.
That was on the green pontoon, Brian, not the one.
Apologies.
Definitely time to go now. Alex, well done.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks all. I'll wrap it up.
Alex. Great stuff.
Cheers.
Thanks
Hopefully we can all get out and get enjoying the water and so on soon. The weather is starting to go our way. Hopefully everything else does. All the best.
Well done. Cheers, Alex.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.